Hi everyone, James here again, and we're going to be talking about The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie one more time. If you have not seen my spoiler-free review, then go and watch that if that's what you were looking for. This is going to be a more spoiler-filled discussion, basically of what I think the central premise of the book was really about. Yeah, so it's gonna be basically all spoilers from here on. I'm not gonna like intentionally spoil stuff, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of things that I don't talk about. But basically, it's like a no holds barred. Like if I say a spoiler, then I will say a spoiler. But it is only going to be for the first book, The Blade Itself. I haven't read the others yet, so if you could be so kind as to not spoil the rest of them in the comments for me and for people that haven't read the rest of it. So anyway, now that all that is out of the way, let's talk about The Blade Itself. I'm going to be looking down here occasionally because I've got notes on this. So The Blade Itself, I think the central theme and motif behind The Blade Itself is this idea of reputation. Reputation is a huge important part to basically every single character in this book, and it explores the way that reputations can influence an individual and how a reputation can cause an individual to treat the world in a certain way as well. And it's basically just having this massive impact on all different kinds of characters, and interestingly, not all in the same way. So we're going to talk about all of that, and we're going to basically just go through it bit by bit. So the Union. We'll start with the characters in the Union. It's really like the only way I can really do this discussion is by talking about blocks of characters, because in terms of actual plot point by plot point, it's a very character-driven story. See my other review for details. But we'll start with Jezal Dan Luther, possibly the most traditional reputation arc. Like his main goal, his driving goal, is to be worthy of something. Like it's to be known for something. Jezal Dan Luther is a man who is born with a certain status because he's a nobleman. His like the Dan in his name means he's a nobleman. So he feels already that he has a certain kind of reputation. He's deserving of a certain kind of respect, but he wants to earn something for himself. So when we meet him for the first time, he's training really hard for this fencing competition known as the contest, where if he wins, he will be granted this wonderful reputation. He'll become something elevated. And one of the main struggles for his character is sort of it's a conflict between what he wants to earn for himself and what he's entitled to have as a nobleman. Because in the beginning of the book, we find that he is not taking his training very seriously. And people call him out for it. Like, people call it, like, they say, you are lazy. And he takes great offense to this, even though he definitely is being incredibly lazy. Like, he takes offense to it. He's like, how dare they speak to me like that? I am Jezal Dan Luther. I am this noble guy. Who are they to tell me that I'm lazy? But then, as it goes along, we find that he becomes more and more hungry to earn this reputation because other people tell him that he can't do it. So he's like driven forward to becoming the best there is. And later on, when he eventually wins the contest, his ego becomes so inflated by this. Because now not only is he noble, but he is the best fencer in the Union, and in his head that means he is the greatest fighter in the world, because he has a very low opinion on characters from the north. He's got the northerners are savages and scum, the southerners are savages and scum, people from outside of Ardua, the capital of the Union, they're savages and scum. It's just really him that is good in his head. And this becomes even more inflated as he gets this lavish feast put on for him, and he's thinking in his head, like, oh my god, like, finally, after all this time, I'm getting what I deserve. But it all becomes kind of hollow for him because of someone we will talk about very shortly. But first, we need to cut to sort of his polar opposite, which is Colin West. Colin West is another soldier in the Union who has built already this reputation for himself. He is a peasant. He comes from nothing, so there's no expectations on this guy whatsoever. But he has earned a solid reputation from being a man of direct action, for being a hard worker, and he's earned some level of actual status to go along with this reputation. But time after time, we see how this gets him in trouble because he is sort of directed to do things that live up to his reputation, and he can't turn them down because he knows that so his reputation is the only thing that is holding him in the position in society where he is, what he's worked towards. He is now basically trapped by his own reputation of being this great soldier, of being first through the breach. So he's given duties and responsibilities that he hates doing, but he sort of has to do because he has earned that spot for himself. And he knows that to throw all that away would be disastrous for him in terms of financial stability, safety, all of the rest of it, all the things that come with being a peasant in a world at war. And we can see how desperate Colin West becomes to hold on to this reputation. Like any sort of slight against his name, any sort of possible thing that could jeopardize his position, he reacts to very violently and very aggressively, like in an unhinged way. When we meet him, it seems like he's going to be a paragon of goodness, and like he's got this sterling reputation for being a great soldier, but really we find that it's a fragile thing that he's trying to grasp onto, and all of that is jeopardized by his sister, R.D. West, who is a side character, but a very important one, both to Giselle and to Colin West. So R.D. is she's Colin West's sister. She's from outside of Ardua, so she's basically a peasant hick in terms of polite society. Polite society rejects her. She comes in basically as a nobody. She's got no reputation, which is a very interesting sort of stance, because we get to see how an unwanted reputation starts to get forced on her. She is very much a free-spirited woman who's just trying to sort of get on and live her life. Nobody wants to give her any sort of respect because she's just, not only is she just a woman, but she's also just a peasant. Therefore, people like the noble ladies don't want to associate with her, but also she can't interact with people of her own real social standing because it will affect Colin West. And that is sort of like a big source of conflict for his character, is how Ardy's reputation that she starts to develop reflects upon him, and her life as well impacts on Giselle, because Giselle sort of suddenly starts becoming, he starts trying to, it's another conflict for him where he's thinking, I need to maintain my noble reputation, my noble standing, and I need to develop my own reputation as this awesome fighter, and all of it starts becoming distracted by this woman that he clearly has fallen in love with, but he can't admit it to himself because his own arrogance in his own reputation forbids him from even entertaining the thought that he could be in love with this peasant woman. But yeah, it's a really interesting source of conflict for them. And obviously Colin West, as we get towards the end of the novel, like he slips completely, and like he goes crazy essentially at the idea that Ardy, because he overhears some soldiers talking badly about his sister, and no, he talks to a guy in an armory about his sister, and he sort of goes crazy and attacks him. So like he attacks like people that are against his sister, and then he goes to her and discovers that she's sort of carrying on this affair with Jazal, and he just goes nuts, and he's like chokes her and he strikes her, and he's like, God, what the fuck, like, you are going to destroy my reputation. And it's, you know, he's got no sort of concept that other people don't care about that. Like, not like the upper echelons of society, obviously they do care about that because they're pricks, but real good people, they wouldn't care so much about that. But he doesn't see that, you know, this reputation that he's struggling to maintain is tearing him apart. And that's a very interesting perspective to lead into our next character, which is Sandan Glokta. Now, Glokta is embodiment of what it means to lose everything, especially your reputation, because we hear from other characters, like we never get a flashback to when Glokta was in the prime of his life. He was this superior soldier. Oh, he's such like the best fighter in the world. He was handsome, the ladies loved him, all of that. Like, we hear about all of that from other characters and from Glokta himself, like in his internal monologue. But when we meet Glokta, he is a broken man. Like, he spent 2 years being tortured. Half his teeth are missing. He's gaunt and frail. He can only eat handfuls of porridge. His leg doesn't work. He's got a horrible cane. He's like a pasty, weird guy now. But we still have the remnants of all these characters talking about him, like, you know, oh, he was the best there ever was. You know, we'll never see his like again. Almost as though he was dead. And in a way, he is dead. Like, the old Sandan Glokta died on that battlefield when he was captured. And what was returned was the husk that shares his body, basically, is, to borrow the phrase from him himself. And Glokta is one of those characters that I think the reason why he works so well is that he cuts through the bullshit. Like, there's nothing left for Glokta to lose in terms of reputation. So he will backtalk people in superior positions. He will do things that polite society would deem unacceptable. And he doesn't care about it so much. He almost has no shame left. And it's like this, you know, he's developed perspective as a person from having everything taken away from him. Like, he is a shadowy warning for people like Colin West and for people like Jazal especially, of the dangers that becoming wrapped up in your own legend can lead to. And what that could mean if you lost it all. So, like, he's a very dark mirror for those kind of characters. And one of Glokta's main things that he does in the story, of course, is to try and expose Bias, the first of the Magi, as a fraud, to prove that the reputation he is laying claim to is fake. I think that's a interesting point of view for his character, because Glokta is a person who very quickly sees through people, I think. And when it comes to Baez, what we see is a man who comes in and immediately tries to embody the reputation that he would have as the first of the Magi, this legendary wizard. Because the very first thing he does when he gets to Ardua is go to like a theatre prop store and buy robes that make him look like a Magi. Because he's described earlier on in the book as like this stocky, somewhat overweight elderly guy who looks more like a butcher than a wizard. And it's about him outwardly presenting the legend of Baez for what it is. But obviously people doubt him because to lay claim to such a reputation is absurd to all of these people. Like, a lot of people don't believe this stuff really happened, or it's just myth, or happened so long ago that no one could possibly be alive. But Baez's story is about a man living up to his own reputation in the purest possible sense. Like, he comes in and says, "This is me. I expect these things because I am me, and you should bow to me because of who I am." Like, and if people believed in him immediately, that is probably what would happen. But because there's sort of this doubt about it, he has to, he has to prove himself. He can't rely only on reputation, where maybe 100 years before the events of this story, maybe he could have done. But like, now there's sort of this idea of you have to prove who you are, which is the same for Jazal, and it's the same for Colin West. Like, they have to constantly live their lives proving who they are, and who they say they are. And it's not so much the same for Glockter now, because basically nobody cares who he is, and who he is now is not the same as the reputation he had, if you see what I mean. Okay, so let's cast our eyes now away from the Union and up towards the North, because I think the North is a land in itself that is very built upon this idea of reputation, and nowhere more clearly is that seen than the concept of named men. Okay, so I didn't quite understand what that was at first. Like, when they say, "Oh, I'm a named man," like, some characters in the North say, "I'm a named man," and other characters there implicitly are not named men. So what is the distinction there? The distinction there is basically a sobriquet, or something added on to their name. Primarily, you've got Logan Nine Fingers. Like, before he was a named man, he would have just been Logan. So Logan Nine Fingers is so named because he has 9 fingers. But it's not just about a physical feature of him that people will name him after. The named part of being a named man is a reputation. You have to earn a name. And there's a lot of talk amongst characters from the North being like, people want to go to war to earn a name. They want to do deeds that will make them named men. And the idea of being a named man isn't always positive. We get to see in Logan's former crew of Northmen, Black Dow balks at the idea that his name is black. Like, he has earned this black reputation for attacking people under the cover of darkness and leaving villages blackened by ash in his wake. And he balks at that idea to say, did you ever think that maybe I don't deserve that? Maybe my reputation shouldn't be as black as my name suggests, because he sort of sees himself as this guy who's doing good things, but the reputation is there. And the same with Forley, the weakest. Like, he earned his reputation by being the worst fighter in the North, essentially, and like he's put up as a lamb for slaughter against Logan Ninefingers in this duel to the death. But obviously Logan spares him, so his reputation is of the weakest, and so being a named man isn't always a positive thing. And I think, as we've seen with characters in the Union, a reputation is not always a good reputation. And let's talk about Bethod as well. Bethod is, you would think that somebody of Bethod's stature would be a named man. And I have to assume that he definitely was, because he was like a chief of a village. He was like, people bowed to him before the events of this book. But when we pick up with him, he's declared himself the king of the Northmen. And some characters that talk about Bethod, they say like, how dare somebody name themselves king of the Northmen? Like, it's almost like stealing a reputation, basically. Like, it's giving yourself this legend, rather than it being something you've earned. And I think Bethod's character is, obviously, he's a very prideful person, and his sons are also, like, his sons are corrupt versions of pride, which is arrogance. Like, Bethod is proud of his accomplishments in that he has united the North for essentially the first time ever. Like, 99.9% of chieftains now bow and serve him because he has proven himself the strongest. So he is calling himself king of the Northmen, but some characters balk at that idea. Like, you can't give yourself that kind of legend. That's something you have to be given by other people. So he's an interesting character in that he's sort of, all of the Northmen, so basically they have reputations based on sort of accomplishments that they've done. And you see this with, let's just talk about Logan Ninefingers. Okay, so Logan Ninefingers, otherwise known as the Bloody Nine, is a man who is constantly running from his own reputation. I said in my spoiler-free review that he's a very introspective, contemplative character, and that is true. But it's more that, like, he is so aware of his own bloody past and will do almost anything to escape from it. Like, when we meet him, he's fleeing from Bethod. We have no context of what happened to him. But as we sort of learn more about his history, we get this tale of how his bloody reputation was earned by winning all of these fights, all of these individual duels, and sort of the strength of that reputation bringing people towards him. Like, his crew is made up of people that he beat in fights but let live. And for the longest time, I think Logan is presented to us as this more or less on the up and up good character. We get this talk of, oh, you've got a bloody past, but none of it matters. Like, that, the past is the past. But what Logan represents is the idea that a reputation will always follow you. And this is highlighted probably the most when we finally get to meet the Bloody Nine, because he sort of becomes this different person, and it's not really clear if he like just goes into a berserker fury, and it's like an alter ego, or if he's like actually possessed by a weird spirit, because he can talk to spirits. And he does seem to try and fight becoming the Bloody Nine, because, as I was to say, it's something that he's trying to run from. But when he finally becomes the Bloody Nine at the end, like, he revels in this idea of striking fear into people. And this he fights another Northman who is like he is called Stonebreaker, and Logan's like, he mocks this guy and he says, you know, you face Logan Nine Fingers, and the guy is taken aback and almost offended because he says a lot of men in the North have lost a finger, not all of them are Nine Fingers, which like is probably the perfect encapsulation of this idea of reputation being built into your name. Like, people from the North know who Nine Fingers is. Like, if you say someone Nine Fingers, they're going to be like, oh god, that guy. You know, so this guy, they're in Ardua, they're not in the North, so he would never expect to run into Logan Nine Fingers there, obviously. So he like fights this guy and he says, you know, I am the Bloody Nine, and he's like, that's bullshit. And he's like, not only is that bullshit, but like, I'm gonna just fucking kill you for trying to take the legend of this other man. But it's not, mate. It was a bad call. It was a bad call because he was the Bloody Nine, and you got fucked up. I'm sorry to say it. So the last character that we need to talk about is Pharaoh Malgin. She has probably got the weakest reputation out of everyone, but we can see that her story is one that she can't escape from either. So she's kind of similar to Logan in that she is hunted now by the Gurkish, like in the South. She is an escaped slave who has a penchant for violence. She wants to kill all of these guys from the Empire. She basically wants to kill everyone. She's a very hostile lady. But her whole thing is, you know, she wants to be free. She wants to escape. But because of the bloody path of conquest that she's carved, well, it's not really conquest, is it? It's fucking vengeance. So because of all of this bloodshed that she's done, she has gained this reputation. Like, people that she's never heard of know her name. People have sought her out. People will hunt her to the ends of the earth. And much like Logan, it's a reputation that you can basically never escape from. She is probably the weakest embodiment of this idea, but I thought it was worth mentioning regardless. So there you go. I mean, that's kind of all of the major characters in the Blade itself, and just sort of how all of their reputations are built and how each one's explored through that lens. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, watch my review, and let me know what you think about the Blade itself. What do you think the sort of core theme is? What do you think the main ideas were? This was just obviously my thoughts, so that's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye.